Good afternoon and welcome, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today on how to get free publicity for your small business. It's been really interesting over the years that I've been working with small business owners. Some of the most successful business owners that I've worked with have got a lot of free publicity. And I encourage you to do exactly the same thing. So what I'm going to share with you today are some tips and advice on how do we get free publicity as small business owners? How do we get our brand name out there? How do we get noticed by the media? And I'm going to share with you some case studies of business owners that have done this really, really well. For those of you that haven't met me before, my name is Andrew Patricio, and I've always been a business owner. But for the last 25 or so years, I've been educating, training, and trying to inspire business owners to build successful businesses. I've been lucky enough to write 2 books on small business and work with business owners in different parts of the world, which makes my work really, really interesting. Also, you get the opportunity to meet ordinary people like you and I that have built great businesses. The one thing I've learned is that most things that we do in business, whether it's marketing, whether it's sales, whether it's the financials, all these things can be learned. And I think this is really important that you understand this, that these things work when you try them out and you see what can work for you. And I encourage you, as you attend these webinars, to think about some of the things that you learned on this event. And more importantly, to test it, to try them, just to see if it's doable out there. And I'm here to tell you that many business owners that I've worked with over the years have got free publicity. Has it been easy? No, nothing is easy. But if you have a strategy and you go through it, I think there's a lot of potential. So why do we even want free publicity? Well, one of the main reasons, and I think one of the obvious ones, is everything we do is to improve our sales. And I think that's really important. It's really not about becoming popular and people knowing about you. It's about building your business. And I think you've got to understand that whatever you do, you want to link back to your business somehow to generate revenue. The second thing, and I think this is one of the key things for me, is credibility. Being a business owner, and especially in small business, can be very, very difficult. And the reason it's really difficult is you're not a brand, you probably don't have all the money in the world to spend on marketing, to build branding. So if you can earn a bit of credibility, it's amazing how many new projects or new business opens up to you. So I want you to understand that building credibility is one of the keys for you to try and do as a business owner. Because once you've got some credibility, people start trusting you. Once people start trusting you, they start buying your stuff. And that's really what you want to be doing, is you want to build this trust. You want to build this credibility in your community, and this will help you grow your business. And the third thing is that I like about marketing, if it's free, I really like it. So one of the advantages of publicity is it's free or nearly free. And the reason I say it's nearly free, obviously, if you're a good writer and you know how to create press releases and you know how to send it through to the media, it'll cost you no money. But if you're anything like me, that's not very good at writing and not very good at doing this type of stuff, ideally, you want to find somebody that can do it for you. And I'm going to share that with you of where do you find these people if you have a story, but you don't know how to tell it yourself. The other thing that helps establish you as an authority, and I'll give you an example. If you're a consultant or if you run a spa in your area, or if you run any service, one of the things you want to try and do is position yourself as an authority. For example, if I was about to start a new business, which I'm not going to do, but let's say I was, or let's say I was going to start something, a new service in my business, one of the first things I try and do was to earn some credibility. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to be seen, to be seen in the media, to be seen in newspapers, to be seen online. These are the type of things you want to be doing because the more often people see you, the more authority or more credibility you earn in your community. And it increases traffic to your website. So all of these things are the reasons we do things. And I believe that every single one of us should have publicity as part of our marketing plan. So it's one of those tools you want to look at. And when I say publicity, there are so many different opportunities. It doesn't just have to be in traditional media. There's opportunities nowadays to be on blogs. There's opportunities to be on podcasts. There's opportunities to, I suppose, even feature on TV shows. There's opportunities to go onto Dragon's Den, Shark Tank. All those things are opportunities for you. What I want you to do is I want you to think about how can I get more publicity, or how can I get onto these type of things, and then work out the detail out there. And those are the type of things I'm thinking about, is how do you get your name out there? How do you get people to know about you? But here's a great example. I really like this business for a couple of reasons. One, it was started out west by a Canadian small business owner, and now they're the biggest garbage removal company in the world. And, you know, like any business, they always start off small. So every single big business out there that you see, you just got to remind yourself, you know, this was a small business once upon a time. Started with a couple of people, they launched this thing, and eventually it grew. And 1-800-GOT-JUNK is a story just like that. And the business owner is one of those that really impresses me. If anybody's ever read books about him or watched videos about him, he's really a business owner like any one of us, but that was really ambitious, I think, was really good at marketing, and was very, very creative. And one of the things that he did, which I thought was really smart, in his offices, he used to take bets with his employees to say that he would be able to get more free publicity than they would. And so this was a game they were playing in the office in the early days of 1-800-GOT-JUNK to get their name out there, because it's very, very expensive if you're going to be doing it, spending your own money to do this. And in this really interesting article, which I believe is very old now, but still relevant, it says, you know, free press is the greatest marketing tool available to any business. Positive media coverage of your company can be extremely widespread and very powerful because it's third-party endorsement. And I want you to understand that. And there's quite a few examples of businesses like it. I'm going to share with you a couple of examples of business owners that I've worked one-on-one. But another example of somebody that has done a great job using publicity. If anybody's ever read anything about Richard Branson and the Virgin brand, he's used publicity really, really well. Another example, actually, if you look at Elon Musk and Tesla, another great example of a company that has used publicity. Elon Musk is almost at a stage that he uses free media to launch all new concepts and ideas that he comes up with. And the media almost want to hear what he says. But he didn't start off like that. You've got to understand that in the beginning, he was an unknown, but he learned very, very quickly how to use free publicity. So yeah, I'm here to tell you that you can potentially do the same thing. And I think it's more a mindset than anything else. It's something that you learn as a business owner. And if you use it, can work really well. It's interesting, actually, when I reflect on the businesses that I've started over the years, I think I've got publicity for every single one of them. And even when I've worked internationally, I was lucky enough to work in places like Russia and the Caribbean and things like that. And whenever I worked in those places, one of the first things I'd say to the organizers of my events is, do you know somebody in the media that we can invite to the event? And these are the type of things you want to be thinking about in your business. Is there an opportunity? Is there an opportunity to, for example, invite the mayor to your business and then get the media involved? Is there an opportunity to do a ribbon cutting at your business? Is there an opportunity to get involved in community projects or community events so that the media shows up? And I want you to think about this and think of any business that's been very successful in your main street or in your area, you'll often see that they'll put on this show almost like they'll have a launch, they'll invite guests out, usually the mayor and important, maybe not celebrities, but important local people to their business. And these are some of the things that you've got to think about. Are these opportunities for you as a business owner? Actually, that is one thing that I just thought about that is also a very good strategy, is in your business, always have an anniversary. So every year you want to celebrate that. You know, we've been in business for 2 years or for 3 years or for 5 years or for 10 years, because again, that creates an event, something that you can tell the media about, that you've been in business for 5 years or 10 years, or in our case, for example, BizLaunch has been around for 20 years now. And, you know, if we were in retail, there would be a good opportunity for us to now contact the local media and say, we're on the Main Street small business, we've been in business for 20 years, and this is what our keys to success are. Here's the thing I want you to understand, is that every single local newspaper, local blog, local podcast, local TV show, every single one of them needs content. And you've got to understand this, that this is your opportunity. But if the media is looking for somebody, they're not going to look for, they don't phone me up and say to me, Andrew, you know, we're looking for somebody that is just average that we want to interview on TV. They usually ask for an expert. And I want you to understand that if you want to become an authority, or if you want to get publicity in the local media, what you've got to try and do is position yourself as an expert. Because remember, the media need this information. If you want to be featured on a podcast, if you want them to write about you in a blog, whatever, you've got to have some knowledge, some experience, some expertise, something unique that makes you different, special, and better. And if you don't, well, it's going to make it very, very difficult. You've got to understand, because the media is always looking for things that are different, that are unique, that are extraordinary, unusual. Those are the type of things they're looking for. But the key thing you've got to understand is that the media needs you. The second thing you can do, which I think is a massive opportunity, is create content that you can share regularly. You know, maybe share it on blogs, maybe share it with your local media. These are the type of things you want to be doing. And if there's any trade publications, for example, what you want to do is you want to write for them. So if you're in the landscaping business, for example, there's probably a landscaping news, or, you know, you want to try and write articles that are of interest to other landscapers and things. And what that does is it positions you as an expert in your industry. And that is exactly what you want to be doing, is understand that, is that the media wants to speak to experts. The media wants to speak to professionals. The media wants to speak with people that have an expertise. So the more you can get out there, you know, into trade publications, onto blogs, into, you know, creating YouTube videos, all of those things, sharing your expertise, the better it is for you. So understand that. The third thing you want to do is participate at conferences. I skipped the blogs on purpose because I discussed it with the trade publications, because I think that is actually more common nowadays. You know, more of us are getting content onto blogs nowadays than actually into publications. And I must be honest, I get contacted regularly by different blogs, by different newsletters and things like that, asking if I want to be interviewed in for their newsletter or their blog. And if I'm getting them, you'll probably get them too, but you've got to position yourself as an expert. And I think that is the key. Another great opportunity is to participate at conferences. You know, one of the most successful business owners I ever worked with was a young woman by the name of Cindy. And she was one of my first students. So on this program where I educate business owners, she was one of my first students. And I remember speaking to her early on and saying to her, you know, if you really want to grow a big business, what you've got to do is you've got to become a personality. And if you want to become a personality, you've got to appear in the media regularly. You've got to do certain things. And one of the things that I recommended she did was to participate at conferences. So when there's events for your industry, let's say, for example, I don't know, retail conference, or an association event or economic development or whatever it is, you want to get involved in this stuff. And the reason you want to get involved in this stuff is that you start building up a reputation, or you start building up a name as somebody that's an expert in your field, and that is exactly what you want to be doing. So what you want to try and do, you want to try and take advantage of these opportunities. But let's think of just more local things that you can do, even in your community. If you get the opportunity to speak at local schools or at local events, you need to take those up. And the reason is you are branding yourself. You're building up a name for your business. And I think that, being out in the public, speaking about your expertise, sharing your knowledge, sharing your experience is a really good idea, especially in the early stages, in the first 5 or 10 years of your business. That's what you want to do, is you want to position yourself as an expert. Actually, I'll tell you a story. When we first started BizLaunch, one of the reasons, I had a partner early on in BizLaunch who I eventually bought out. But one of the reasons I partnered with this guy is he understood the value of getting free publicity, because I had used it in my previous businesses. So he understood this. And that's one of the reasons we partnered, because as soon as I started this current business, I was new to the country, I was new to the industry, but because I was appearing in the media regularly, in newspapers and on radio and on TV, people assumed I was an expert. Whether I was or not doesn't matter. That's the assumption that people made about me, because they'd see me in the media on a regular basis. So getting out there and speaking at different events that, and I think the one thing, you've got to do is you've got to try and do what fits into your comfort zone. And in my case, speaking at conferences, for me, was an easier way than socializing at different events. But socializing at local community events, I think, is also a good opportunity. You want to be known in your community, especially if you're a relatively new business. People want to know who owns that coffee shop down the road. People want to know who owns that hardware store. And the more you can get involved in your community, the better it is. For those of you that are consultants or selling services, writing a book is always a good idea. I know when I've written 2 books, and I know that it opened up a lot of doors for me. And it's just almost like that perception. People assume because you've written a book, you're probably an expert in your field. So it opened up lots of opportunities for me in the early days of BizLaunch. And I think it's an opportunity for some of you. Obviously, not all of you should be spending your time writing a book. It's not going to be worthwhile for your business, but it's an opportunity for you if you want to position yourself as an expert. And then the final one, which I think is something that all of us can do, is be really active on social media. You want to get involved on Facebook, sharing your knowledge, your expertise. You want to be on YouTube, you want to be on Instagram, just sharing your knowledge. I mean, if you're a baker, you want to be sharing how you bake things, how you make stuff, all of that. You positioning yourself as an expert in the field. So it doesn't really matter what your business is. What you want to do is you want to share your knowledge and share your expertise. You want to position yourself as somebody that knows what they're doing. And so even if you don't get into local blogs or get into local newspaper or local radio or TV, you can create your own channels. And I've seen a bunch of people do this really, really well. And again, the key thing, I think it's not about the number of people that are watching you, but the fact that people are watching you is the key. Just be very, very careful of, thinking, well, lots of people watching me is what you want to be doing. What happens is when you create content, it populates on the internet. And then when people are searching for you, that's what they find. And I think that is really the key thing. One of the most important things, I think, for every single business owner, for you, for me, for any other business out there, is what is our story? And you've got to be able to tell your story. Let's use an example. Let's say you're running a bakery. How did you come up with your recipes? Who gave you these things? You've heard these stories before, where a restaurant owner will say, well, I learned this is an old family recipe. That's always a great story. Or, when it comes to baking, we've got this recipe where we learned from traditional ways or whatever it is. People love hearing those things. And I want you to understand that you've got to become a storyteller. What happens in business is when you start saying things, just be careful you don't overdo it. But when you start saying things like, let me tell you a story, everybody's attention, you get everybody's attention. So you've got to tell your story of your business. I remember when one of the first businesses I started was selling roasted peanuts, and we used to have a story around it. We used to say to people that, firstly, we say to people we sell the best peanuts in the world, and we'd have information about that. We say we've done research, we've tried different peanuts, and we've identified the variety that sells best. And then we used to speak about the way we used to roast the peanuts. We used to speak about, the freshness and all this. So we had always had a story to tell, because people were curious. They'd say to us, how do you roast the peanuts? Where do they come from? And we had a story. And people loved that. Even when I was in retail, people want to know our story. The fact that we were a family business, the fact that we cared about the community, all of those things. And I think that if you don't have a story about your business, I would work on it. Find somebody that can tell your story. Find somebody that can tell why you started your business. Find somebody that can tell how you choose your products or services, because that's a really important part of your marketing. That passion, all of that goes into what you do is what people buy. And you've seen it in restaurants, you've seen it in bakeries, you've seen it in retail businesses where people have a story. And I want you to think about that is, do you have an interesting story? So that's the first thing. The second thing, you've got to understand that's what the media wants. The media wants interesting stories. If they interview you and they say to you, sir, how did you start your business? You just say, well, I was working for somebody, I resigned and I started this thing. That's a boring story. But if you say something like, I always wanted to open a bakery. I worked for different bakers. I learned different recipes from different, obviously you don't want to lie, but you want to tell your story. You want to tell what motivated you, what inspired you, all of that type of stuff. That should also be on your website because that influences people's buying decision. And I think for a lot of businesses, the story is what sells it. I really think the story is, especially when we pay a premium product. If you've bought a pair of shoes, for example, that are more expensive, or you've bought a purse or a bag, or you've bought food or whatever it is, and you've paid a premium for it, there's usually a story behind it. And they'll say, for example, this cheese is specially made by a family in Quebec where they collect small batches of milk or whatever it is. These are the type of things people want to listen to. And I want you to learn to tell that story of your business. I mean, some of my favorite examples I think of over the years are one tea company, for example, and they went on to become very successful, appeared on Dragon's Den, and now are a very successful brand. But they used to always tell their story about how they chose their teas, how they traveled to the East, how they went to these farms, they spoke to the owners, they did all those things, and then they chose these teas. And it was just a lovely story to hear about the passion, about why they started, all these type of things. So I want you to create a story. I want you to create a story around your business. What motivates you, what motivated you to start this business, all of those things. Actually, interestingly enough, my brother's in the real estate business. And you guys will meet Marco next week because he's doing the 2 webinars next week. And Marco said to him, when you're selling real estate, always have a story behind it because people buy into a story. And he gave a very good example of where he was selling real estate in a farming area. And I don't know if any of you've ever been to farming areas, but there's a smell. There's quite a strong smell usually of manure that if you're not used to it, you're going to say, well, this is not a good smell. But if you're used to it, it brings back memories of your childhood or whatever it is. And that is exactly the story they sold, is that you could tell 2 stories. The one is, we're going to build these houses in this area and it's stinky because it's farms, Or you could say, we're going to build these houses in this area around farms that obviously have farm smells. It'll remind you of when you was a kid. And just telling the story in a way that related to customers. Obviously, if you were a consumer that didn't want to be around farm smells, well, you're not going to buy this property. But what happened was that he sold the properties off quite quickly because people almost related this property to when they were kids and they went to go to farms and things like that. And some of you can relate to it and others can't. But I want you to try and tell stories about your products, about your service, about your business. These are the type of things you want to be doing. And this will motivate your customers to buy your products or services, but it will also give the opportunity that if you're ever interviewed on radio or TV and they ask you, so how did you start this business? And then you tell the story of why you started this business, and then you tell the story. And I'm going to give you a very good example of somebody that I worked with that did exactly that. I mean, the story was there already. It's not that we had to come up with a story, but we had to learn how to tell that story. And I think that is really the key, is you learn how to tell your story. What makes your business special and unique? I mean, this is a real marketing thing. You know, I often say to business owners, you know, what differentiates you? What makes you unique? What makes you different? What makes you special? If you want to get publicity for your business, they are looking for that. They're looking for that story. They're looking for things that make you unique, that make you different, that make you better than the other bakeries, that make you better than the other ice cream stores, that make you better than the other convenience stores. And you've heard all these stories, you know, where convenience stores will speak about maybe their ethnic background, or they'll speak about their range of products, or they'll speak about what makes them different or unique. These are the type of things you want to be thinking about. You want to try and identify what makes my business interesting. And any business you can make interesting. I mean, I've seen it with corporations, how they take a boring product or boring service and turn it into a very interesting story. So I'm here to tell you that you want to learn to tell your story for a couple of reasons, from a marketing perspective and also from getting a publicity perspective. But here's a very good example. It's actually one of my favorite examples. And some of you have maybe heard me speaking about this business owner before, but she did a training program with me, I think maybe 5 years ago, and she had just moved to Canada, and she's an architect, and she was in an industry that is, first of all, she was an immigrant, which was a big disadvantage in the industry. It was dominated by men, and she was dealing with big construction companies, a very, very difficult thing. And she said to me, how do you think I should break in? I said, well, there's no simple way, because you're at a disadvantage. You don't have the experience in the environment, and whether you're good or not doesn't matter. People have these perceptions. And I said, one of the ways you can do that is by positioning yourself as an expert. And the only way you can position yourself as an expert is by sharing your knowledge. And you've got to understand the value of that. And she's done not a good job, a much better job than I expected. I mean, I just Googled her name on YouTube this morning just to see, and you can see all the stuff that comes up about her. You know, there's a whole lot of stuff on different websites that feature her, feature videos, feature content, all of this type of stuff. So I want you to understand the value of this. It is a very, very powerful thing. She's an architect, like there's thousands of architects out there. Actually, somebody on this webinar a few weeks ago said that there's 900 architectural firms in the city of Toronto. If that's the case, standing out is quite challenging, isn't it? But she's been really smart in the sense that she's positioned herself as an expert and continually creates content. And I'm going to show you another example of what she's done, which I think is really, really smart. And obviously not all of you in the architectural business. Some of you are retailers, some of you are selling services, but I'm here to tell you that this was done recently and is doable. So, you know, talking about things is easy, you know, saying you can do this and do that, whatever, easy. But showing examples, I think, is the key. And I want you to understand, for every single thing that I teach on these webinars or on these masterminds, I like sharing practical examples of people that are doing it. People that, like you and I, that have started businesses in the last 5 years, the last 10 years, or even in the last 20 years, that have used examples like this to do it. So what I'm saying to you is it's doable. I know this business owner really well. I've guided and helped her over the years. Actually, I'm meeting her for coffee on Friday because we're discussing how much success she's had. But she's built this business mainly sharing educational content and getting publicity. So let's say you're a bakery and you're saying to me, wow, how do I create content? Well, you do exactly the same thing. You share your expertise as a baker. You bake, you share recipes, you educate people on how to become a better baker. And by doing that, they know that you're a professional. They just assume you're a professional because you're on the internet so often. And I want you to understand that. So even in very difficult industries to break into, which is often the situation with small business owners, is if we're the new person on the block or the new person on the main street, whatever it is, it's very, very difficult to get going in the beginning. And you've got to understand this. So you've got to come up with a strategy to be seen in as many different places as possible. The key thing you've got to understand with any of these examples I'm going to share with you is they've got to have a news angle. You know, the key thing, especially if you're trying to get into traditional media, is the media wants something that is interesting, something that is different, something that is special, something that is unique. That is what they're looking for, because they're not there just to advertise. You know, they've got an advertising department. So if you go to the media, any local media, and say, you know what, I was on this webinar yesterday and this guy said I should get publicity. Can you give me some publicity? They're going to say, which guy said this? So just so you understand that, is that you've got to understand what motivates media, what motivates local radio stations, TV stations, blogs, podcasts, YouTube channels, Shark Tank, Dragon's Den, all of these things. You've got to understand there must be something that motivates them to put you on there. And these are the type of things they're looking for, things that are new. So, for example, I had a very, very simple example. A coffee shop owner on one of my programs wrote about being the first company to bring in the special coffee machine. And I mean, you know, you'd think, well, is that interesting? Well, the media found it interesting because it was a unique machine, one of a kind, that made special coffee, and they were bringing it in. Actually, I was reading a story this morning about this coffee shop, very, very competitive industry. So what this guy did was, in this article that I was reading, he spoke about entering competitions. You know, this is a local coffee shop, entering competitions for the best barista, and then bringing in a special machine, certain machines to make this type of coffee and that type of coffee, and he got publicity for it. So the point I want to make is that when your story is interesting, when it's unique, when it's different, the media wanna listen to it. But if it's just about regular coffee, why would they be interested? Why would they be interested when there's 10 different coffee shops in the main street and you make coffee like everybody else? So you want to try and find something unique. Maybe it's the source of your coffee. Maybe it's the way you choose the coffee beans. Maybe it's the way you roast it. Maybe it's the way the machine you use. Whatever it is, these are the type of things that people find interesting. It needs to be unusual. And if you can find something that's unusual, that's a really powerful strategy. And the other one is if it can be sensational. I'll give you two examples, but just be very, very careful. Being controversial can backfire sometimes. I know when I first started in this industry, I think it's now 27 years ago, when I first started in this industry, I was a newbie, so no idea what I was doing. But I went to this networking event and I met this banker there. And she said to me, what do you do? And I said, I teach people the steps they need to take to build a successful business. She said, well, that's a tough business to be in. I said, why? She said, well, 80% of small businesses fail in the first year. And this has been really, really interesting because I've worked in many different countries And that percentage gets bandied around. I'll go to Croatia, and they'll say that 80% of small businesses fail. Then I'll go to Jamaica, and they'll tell me the same thing. And I think to myself, but who came up with this number? And usually, nobody came up with this number. It's usually one of those urban myth things that have been traveling around for years, and people just keep repeating it. And if you keep repeating something often enough, people start believing it, is what happens. Anyway, so I wrote this article, or got somebody to help me write this article for the local media, actually appeared in the local Chamber of Commerce newsletter, about how people are saying that the failure rate of small business is so high, and it's not actually that high. And that was very, very good for my business. But I saw an example 2 weeks ago, actually, a guy involved in education business, and he did exactly the same thing. I actually found the article a bit controversial, to be honest with you. And I don't know if it's because I'm getting old or what, is I thought to myself, wow, that's a bit ballsy to say that in the media. But anyway, the point is that he got noticed. And I think that was his key. It was a bit sensational. It was a bit, I would say, a bit risky, in my opinion. But this guy gets media regularly. So I think he knows what he's doing. I hope he knows what he's doing. The other thing you want to try and do is you've got to understand that when you've got publicity, especially for radio, TV, or newspapers, it's got to affect as many people as possible. And it'll be of public interest. You know, something happening in your community that is important could be, let me give you an example of something that could potentially work. I've noticed in the media recently that a lot of cars are being stolen. And you see these stories of, in certain places, a car is being stolen every half an hour, and they have the special technology, whatever. If you're in the electronics business, and if you've got something to counter that, a great article would be to put into the media how to protect your vehicle from, getting stolen. The media would find that interesting. And why would they find that interesting? Because it affects a lot of people in your community. And secondly, it's of public interest. So that's the way you want to try and think of it. The other thing you want to do is you got to understand that the media wants stuff that is interesting reading, and especially nowadays. If you've got a blog, or if you've got an online magazine or a newsletter or a local radio station, it's very, very difficult to get noticed. The reason it's very difficult is because there's just so much content. And because there's so much content, you want things that are unique, you want things that are interesting, you want things that are good to view, good to listen. These are the type of things you want to look at. It needs to be innovative, it needs to be creative, it needs to be beneficial, funny, or extraordinary. So I want you to think about that if this is one of your decisions that you decide to approach local media, try and think of those things. What makes this new and innovative? What makes this creative? How does the audience benefit from reading from this? How's this funny or extraordinary? Are the type of things you want to be looking at. Let me give you one of my favorite examples. So I met these two business owners in Windsor, Ontario, maybe, I don't even know, 5-7 years ago. Everything seems to be 5. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But I met them a few years ago. And at the time, the Small Business Center said to me, can I meet up with them? And I was just amazed with their story. The story goes like this. This young guy was at high school. He wanted to start a business, went to his mom and said, you know what, that fatouche dressing that you make, I want to sell it at a local market. So that's a story. But there's so many different angles to it. Immigrant family, a mother and son, all of these things. And the media have lapped it up. I must be honest, the media, far beyond my expectations. I mean, obviously, they make a really good product. They've built a great business. But here's the most important thing. The media has helped them get noticed. So they've been picked up by Costco. They've been picked up by different retailers. And I'm not saying only because of the media, but I've noticed them getting a lot of media. It started off with newspaper. I've seen them on TV. I've seen them getting awards, all of these things. The only reason I know this is because I have a one-on-one relationship with them, but I've just seen the progression of this. And one thing I want you to understand, there's almost this snowball effect there's the snowball effect that once you've appeared in the media once, they tend to notice you. I've got another example, and I was looking for this story this morning, is also in the Windsor area. There's been quite a lot of I've done a lot of training in the Windsor area, maybe that's the reason. But there's quite a lot of business owners there that have got quite a lot of publicity. And one I can think of is a guy that runs a fast, like takeout restaurant type of thing, and has got both positive and negative publicity. The negative publicity is really capitalized on. So people, some of his customers are complaining about some of the meat that they sell. They sell halal meat, and there was a bit of controversy around that, but he used it in his favor. And I want you to understand that obviously you don't want negative publicity, but even negative publicity can be good for your business. Ella says, I might have missed this as I'm hoping to, a bit late, but the contact media with an interesting story. You just go to the website. I'll tell you how to do that, okay? I haven't discussed that yet. So, but here's the thing you want to be doing is when you've got an interesting story, get somebody to tell it really well, like this example of these two business owners, tell it really well, tell it from different angles, and then target the media. That's what you want to be doing. So how can we get free publicity? You know, what opportunities are available to business owners like you and I? And I'm going to show you a couple of really simple things that you can do. Because obviously, for some businesses, it's relatively easy. You bring in your machines, you're an expert at this, whatever it is. But for some of you, maybe not so easy. So one of the first things you want to try and do is to try and be innovative and try and think of what does the media want. And let me tell you, one of the easiest ways to do it is to do customer service surveys, or just to ask customers questions, about different things. And it's really interesting how the media latches onto that. 90% of people say this, or 80% of consumers say they feel like they're paying more for groceries or whatever. You'll see this in the media regularly, speaking about people, for example, now that the interest rates have gone up and it's had an impact on their mortgage, how they're struggling to live, and all that type of stuff is things that the media loves to lap up. So maybe you can do that, just do a survey of your customers. Another one that works really, really well, I've seen this done many times over the years, is top 5 lists, or top 7 or top 10 or whatever it is. The media likes these things, the top 5 colors for 2023, or the top 3 ice cream sales, or the top this or whatever. The media love listening to those things, and putting it in their media, because it's just simple, easy to consume. These are the top 5 selling bagels or whatever, or these are the top 3 selling cream cheeses or whatever. I don't even know, but you got to think about this. I know for us, for example, when we want to write an article to get media, we'll do that. The top 5 things you need to do to grow your business, for example, in 2023, would be something that we know the media would be interested in. It's short, it's sweet, it's to the point, and it's relevant to quite a large audience. The other thing you can do is develop an annual community award. And again, I've got this business owner that I was speaking about earlier on, Cindy, that I was talking about. She's just started a new thing, which I think is absolutely brilliant. So in a community, she's decided to get a whole bunch of people together to clean up different parts of a community. So she's linked it to a brand, invited customers to come to her store, and then they'll go out and remove garbage in certain areas. And I mean, this sounds very, very simple, but the reality is that if you see this being done in your community, you feel a little this warm and fuzzy thing. So I think there's an opportunity, for example, to attach yourself to these type of things. Maybe, for example, get local schools involved and then have an award for the best cleaning school, or whatever it is the things you want to be doing. And again, you want to try and get creative. Maybe have an award, for example, if you own a bakery, have a baking competition for local schools, or an art competition for local schools, or whatever it is. But you want to create awards where you get involved and obviously attach your name to it. The other thing you want to do is you want to try and piggyback on stories in the media. So the amount of cars being stolen would be a very, very good example. Maybe if you sell insurance, you could give people the top 7 things you should do to reduce your insurance because of the amount of cars being stolen. You see, it's an interesting angle that the media might be interested in. And then write some surprising facts about your industry. And the example I gave you earlier on of the failure rate of small business is an example of what you could be doing. So if people are publishing, or the media is publishing, or you see it, hear it on a radio or local TV station about some interesting things that you can speak about, you would do that. The other thing people love hearing is success stories. Obviously not everybody, but I love hearing success stories. So there's so many examples. Actually, one of the best examples, if you want to watch, is if you ever watch Dragon's Den, they tell the stories of the dragons, how they started with very little, and then they built up their businesses over time. And some of them have used publicity really, really well to speak about their brands. And maybe you've got a story like that, a little bit about your background. In Canada, stories that people really like reading, what I like reading, are stories of immigrants that have arrived. And those are always warm and fuzzy stories, because I think it's a very Canadian thing, and maybe you don't like them, but I like them, of somebody that arrived here with no money, and then they built up their business over time. And I like those stories, and so do the media. And I can think of a few business owners that I interact with that tell their story, which I think is really good. The Sponsor Local Community Service Project, I mentioned this one well enough already. Disprove a well-known myth, for example. If there's anything out there that that people should know, and don't always assume that everybody knows things that that people should know, that urban legends or something like that, you can speak about. Write a story about being first, I mentioned that earlier on, and do some interesting research and publish findings. I mean, you can do that, for example, speak to a local college or university and let them do some research in your area, maybe about the affordability of living or things like that. Or if you're a real estate agent, for example, speak about how people are managing with the new interest rates and inflation, all this type of stuff. There are so many things going on now that are impacting your community that you can speak about. And those are the things you want to try and identify. One of the things that I'm going to share with you is, how do you write press releases? But let's say you're not that type of person. One of the first things I would do, depending on your budget, is speak to somebody at your local small business center. Okay, speak to somebody at your local small business center. They will know somebody locally that does this. These are people that this is their job. They get publicity for companies, and we've used them in the past. Actually, we've used them very effectively. We were running seminars across the country, and we had a full-time PR person on retainer getting us publicity when we were in the early days of BizLaunch. So I'm here to tell you that it does work. Again, the same process. You want to find somebody that has relationships with the media you want to get into. Actually, one of my employees, past employees that work really well, is actually focused, her business now is focused on getting people publicity. I've got no idea how much she charges or how she does it, but it's really interesting to see her. But let's say you cannot afford an expert, which is such a common small business situation. You come to a seminar like this, and somebody says to you, pay somebody to get publicity, and you say, well, I cannot afford that. So what I did is I did some research for you, and I went online and I typed in where to study public relations. And there's a whole lot of colleges across Ontario that you can approach, because they teach young people how to do this as a career. A big, big opportunity for them is to work with a real business. So if you know somebody at a local college, speak to them and say, listen, you'd like to get a bunch of students to try and get some free publicity for your business. It's good for them because it's a practical example they can work with, and it's really good for their resume. So I want you to understand is we've got to be creative. I mean, or you can go online. If any of you use websites like Fiverr or Upwork, there's lots of people on there. This is their job. This is what they do. they find publicity for businesses. Again, they'll interview you, they'll tell you what they can and can't do, hopefully, and you're going to do the same thing. So the first thing, if you want to get publicity, I think is be very, very targeted. So I can think of one business owner specifically. She was in the fashion business, and she sold unique fashion. Females were a target market. And what she did really, really well is she targeted blogs that were specifically for her target market, which I thought was really, really smart. And I'm going to recommend you do the same thing. It's very, very, very targeted. You firstly want to identify who your target market is. So you want to identify who they are, and then you want to identify what do they read, what TV do they watch, what blogs do they read. And these are the type of things you want to be doing. Actually, one of the big strategies nowadays that businesses are using local influencers. So not so much the media, but influencers. And there's a whole lot of stories out there that I've read recently about how brands are using influencers, local influencers, to speak about their products or services. So again, if it's not a media that you can think of, is maybe a local influencer, somebody in your area that's got a bunch of followers that you can communicate with. You want to choose the media you want to get into. And one of the strategies could be, like you want to target influencers, you could target journalists that write specifically about your industry. So you would seek out blogs, you'd seek out YouTube channel, you seek out podcasts, all this type of media that are speaking about. If you've got a local radio station, for example, if somebody regularly speaks about finance and you sell, I don't know, investment products, it would be a good idea to reach out to them. If you've got somebody that speaks about gardening and you're in the landscaping business, if somebody speaks about food and you're in the food retailing business, all of these things are opportunities. So you've got to be creative. The other thing you want to do is you want to build a database of contacts. Let me just go back one step. If you use somebody that's in the business of getting publicity, so the PR is their business, usually they will have a list of contacts. But let's say you can't afford that. You can find media contacts on websites. You can find all of these type of things. They're available. They're not that difficult to find, but you can find them. And like anything, they're not all waiting for you and saying, "Oh, really? You went to that My Main Street webinar with Andrew. We've been waiting for you to contact us." That's just not how things work. So sometimes it's visiting his website, but usually a better way is knowing somebody, okay? So I often say to business owners, if you associate with your local small business center, they will often have media contacts. Why? Because the media will approach them for small business stories. So think of that. If you've got a relationship with your local small business center, this could work in your favor. They could have lists of contacts in local media, local radio stations, local TV stations, local blogs, local things like that. But you can build your own database too. You want to collect, if you want to get onto TV and radio, you want to get onto news desks, program directors, those type of things. And these things change all the time. So regularly start building up a database of these things. I try and identify people that write about your stuff, people that speak about your stuff, and then start building a database. That's the first thing. Here's a very good example. So this is a vegan burger joint. I don't know if it's a good burger joint or a bad burger joint, but so this is a local newspaper called in Brampton. I think they have in Mississauga, in Halton, a whole bunch of them, which is very, very targeted. I'm not sure if they get the best coverage in the area, but you know what? Any coverage, in my opinion, is good. So probably what happened is these guys were opening this new burger joint. Either they contacted the in Brampton newspaper or online newspaper, or they saw them. They're looking for new businesses in the area, and then they wrote this article. You've got to understand the value of this. The value for you as a small business owner, you're opening a new burger joint, you've appeared in the local media, which is very targeted to your area, in this case, Brampton, and that link stays there forever. And that's the way I want you to understand it. So what you want to do is you want to write the media release. So how do you write the media release? Some of you are going to write it yourself, and others are going to get somebody to write it. So usually, in the case of Biz Launch, I'll tell you how we've done it over the years. Usually, our media releases will be between 400 and 500 words. Okay, so that's usually how we'd write it. We'd write it with a really powerful heading. We'd put a couple of pointers, and then we'd send it through the media. But we'd be very, very targeted. So, for example, if our topic was specific small business, we look for small business journalists and we'd send it to them directly. For example, we used to get onto City TV quite a few times, and then we used to target the directors, so the show directors and things like that, and that's the way we do it. And that works really, really well. Obviously, actually what I would do if I was you, I would look at the newspapers or whatever it is, or watch the TV show, or listen to the radio show, and just see what type of content they're speaking about. Once you've written the media release, or your publicist has written it, or that university student that you got has written it, they will send it through to the media, okay? And then you will follow up. Again, you want to be polite, you want to be friendly, but also a little bit persistent. You know, journalists will often say, you know, we ignore it and you shouldn't contact us and all this type of stuff. And they write, but the point is you're a business owner. If I was you, I'd be persistent. And if you're persistent, things will work out. You don't want to irritate them, but you want to be persistent. You want to phone up or email and ask, has a release been received? And if there's any interest, ask if they would like to clarify anything, which is sometimes what happens. You send a press release to the media or to the radio station or to a TV station or to a local blog, and they don't really get exactly what you're saying. So you must make sure that you offer to clarify. Ask if they require photographs. Usually they do require photographs. Here's a really good bit of simple advice for every single one of you. If you haven't done it, and I haven't done it for years, so I'm being a bit hypocritical here by telling you to do it, but the truth is that you should take good photographs of yourself and of your business, and get a professional photographer to do it for you. Find somebody local that takes good photographs so that you have this available. I know over the years, as we've got quite a lot of publicity, it's not our focus now, but as we were growing our business, we'd always have photographs available. You know, if it was me, photographs of me doing a seminar or a workshop or whatever it is, high quality, whatever it is, and then send it through to them. So it's a really good idea. Usually they want photographs of you, the owner. And if you're a baker, they want of you baking. If you're a chocolatier, they want of you chocolatiering. If you're whatever you do, they want photographs of you doing. Actually, you can see every now and then, you'll see on TV or, you can see it's almost like stage where I was looking at an example yesterday, and you could see this lawyer, they was talking about this legal case, and this lawyer was sitting there. You could see he wasn't really doing anything and thinking, they probably said to him, sit in front, looking at your computer, and we'll take a video of you, which is exactly what they do. They want to see you in your doing your thing, and that's what they want. So take really good quality photographs. Actually, this is good advice for everything in small business. Take good photographs of yourself so you can use on LinkedIn, on social media, all that type of things, and take very good photographs of your product. I can't tell you how many times I say to small business owners, get a local photographer to take photographs of your product. Some people have awful photographs because I don't know, they're not professional, they just use their iPhones, whatever. And even if you do use, iPhones or whatever your local phone, just use lighting. It's really not that difficult. Go onto the internet, Google how to improve the lighting of your product, and make sure you do it. It's really not difficult to take an average photograph and make it look good. And encourage the reporter to contact you. I'm going to say this again, is what happens, and I've seen this many, many times over the years, is once you build up a relationship with the media, they will contact you regularly. My son Daniel's a very good example. Over the years, he's got a bit of publicity. because he was at Shopify, then he started his own online business, and now he's just created an app. And he already got publicity for this app, and the way he did it was he reached out to people that wrote articles about him years ago and said, "Hi, it's Daniel. You remember you published that article about me starting my online business? Well, now I've created this new app." And that is exactly what you want to do, is you want to follow up with different people that you've worked with before. Follow up with people that you know in the industry. If you know somebody that knows somebody that knows somebody, that works really, really well, especially for local community stuff. So the press release needs to be written. If you don't know how to write press releases, actually what I would do is I would go to Google and just type in how to write a press release. I think it'll be better actually than the way I've explained it is what I would do. Here's another example. Okay, so this is a local small business in Chatham, Kent, and she was featured in the local newspaper. Very, very good for her business. Okay, very targeted and speaking about how business is going to survive in the post-pandemic world. Okay, so the article is not specifically about her business, it's how she's going to survive. But the important thing for her is a photograph that people in her community are going to recognize. They know she sells clothing. All of these things by association are good for this business owner. And I want you to understand that this would be very, very expensive for her to pay for in her local media. And this is what you need to understand. Now, very, very often over the years, I have been interviewed by the different newspapers, radio stations, blogs, podcasts, blah, 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 blah. Usually they will say to you, "I will call you on Tuesday at 2 p.m. or Thursday at 10 a.m. Here's my advice to you. If you're going to have a follow-up interview, always be well prepared. Do a bit of research, read maybe their magazine or watch their shows or whatever it is, just so you know what's going on. Be up to date on your business, which is really, really important. You've always got to position yourself as an expert in your industry. So if you're an expert in your industry, you need to know what's going on. The media loves statistics. Let me say that again. The media loves statistics, and they're going to try and get numbers out of you. So if you can say 3 out of every 10 customers that come into our store buy this product, they love that. Or 70% of people say that they're spending more on groceries or whatever. The media loves percentages. So that's the first thing. The second thing you want to do is you want to use examples that people can relate to. And I think this is very, very important. Actually, I was having this discussion this morning. So we create a lot of online content. So we're speaking about creating a program now for a client, or potentially creating a program for a client on cybersecurity. And one of the things that I said to them, which is really important, is when you're working with small business owners, use language that they can understand, firstly, and secondly, use examples that they can relate to. So using this high-level language that doesn't relate to small business owners or using examples that they can't relate to, it's an absolute waste of time. The same thing when you get interviewed. They want to listen to local examples. They want to listen to local stories. They want to know how you, do these things on a daily basis, what your customers say, all those type of things. Make sure you're not going to be disturbed in your interview and keep your answers short, sweet, to the point. I always say to people, you can confuse people by using fancy language, but if you use simple language, everybody understands you. And that has been my rule actually in business. In every single thing we do, whether it's webinars, whether it's seminars, whether it's workshops, whether it's online content, we simplify it as much as possible. I know this has happened quite a few times over the years. People will say, "Oh, it's very, very simple." And I'm thinking, so you really want me to confuse you and complicate it? Because I think the basics are very, very simple and you need to relate to them. Whenever you're being interviewed, just relax and be yourself. Sometimes we get a bit stressed or a bit anxious because we've been interviewed, and just relax. I think it's so important that you just relax when you're being interviewed, whatever it is. Here's another great example. This is another Brampton business, and they participated in the My Main Street program, and then they were featured on the City of Brampton website. Okay, So there's an example of a really good link. And understand that there's opportunities in all of these programs to be able to get a bit of publicity. But again, these are probably really nice people, small business, they've got a story to tell, very, very targeted, all those type of things. You can see the heading, Knowledge Bookstore in Brampton finds a new way to give back. So that's their story, and that's what the media is interested in. So I want you to think, and I want you to be creative. I want you to try and identify opportunities that are available to you in your community. Because every single one of us in different communities have different opportunities. Whenever you're being interviewed, and this is really, really important, for those of you that know me or have met me before, or have attended my webinars and things like that, or my seminars, you know that I'm really blunt and straightforward, which is good sometimes, but sometimes not good. Because I will say things like this to journalists, this is off the record, but, and I've learned a very important point to never say this is off the record, but, because then they put that into the article. I remember once in the early days of this business, I was interviewed about partnerships. And I said to the journalist, you know, don't put this in the article, but this is what I say to small business owners, is that before you enter into a partnership in business, sign the divorce agreement. I said, but don't put that. What was the heading? Small Business Expert says that before business owners should enter in partnerships, they should sign divorce agreements. Anyway, so nothing is off the record. Remember that. The media is often looking for things that are, I don't want to say sensational, but different. Don't badmouth your competitors. Just be very careful of this. I mean, it's very tempting. Actually, I get caught up myself sometimes in speaking to people about competitors, and I just have to remind myself, nobody cares. Just stop bad-mouthing competitors. Doesn't matter how bad they are, don't talk about them, okay? Reporters are well-trained, usually. So if you work with a reporter, or let's say you're not working with a reporter, let's say you're working with a PR person or somebody that's used to getting publicity, they're really good at asking questions. They're really good at getting stories out of people. So understand this is their expertise. If you're working with a reporter, which will often happen, is ask them what angle they want if they're writing an article for a specific target market. It's like even myself. If a reporter comes to me and says they're writing an article about Main Street small businesses, I'll use Main Street small business articles. If they're writing an article about people exporting, I will use examples of people exporting. So I want you to understand that you've got to make the article as relevant as possible. Here's another example of a great idea. Remember Nama? I speak about her regularly because she's really good at getting publicity. She was just nominated as one of the most influential people in Ontario real estate. So let me just tell you why this happened. What happens is when you appear in the media regularly, people start noticing you. Because they start noticing you, they start thinking, this person must be doing something well. And then what they'll do is they'll often contact you, ask you if you don't mind being nominated. They'll interview you, they'll see that you're a nice person, and then they'll do it. And that's what's happened to her. She's a good architect that's built a great business, but she's a nice human being, and the media like dealing with nice human beings, just so you understand. So getting this award was a very, very good thing. Well, not an award, this nomination. I know I'm going to an event on Friday, for example, where she is speaking at this event about her business and how she went through this program and things like that. Again, an opportunity for her to position herself as an expert, small business owner, started with nothing, did a course, that I ran, and has gone on to become very successful. So these are the type of things that the media is looking for. It just shows you what happens is how you can capitalize on all the different forms of media. I always say to people, make friends with the media. So make friends with influencers, make friends with local blogs, make friends with people that write newsletters, make friends with people that have podcasts. Just be a nice person in general, I think is a good policy in business, is just be a nice person in general. Because you want to build relationships. And I've seen this over the years, is I've got a lot of publicity for business owners because the media will contact me. And I'll be honest with you, I send them people that I like. That's what I do. I send them people that I like. So, and you might say, well, that's a bit biased. And you know what? You are right. But that's what I do in business. I do business with people I like. So this is one of the strategies that I use. If you're working with reporters, get back to them as soon as possible. I think follow-up is key. This is one of my pet peeves, to be honest with you, lately, is that I just find people just don't get back to you. And this is very, very frustrating for me. I know I'm working on a couple of projects now in Portugal. And I mean, my biggest frustration is people don't get back to me. And so what do? I follow up. So that's one of the strategies you've got to use is if people don't follow up, you've got to follow up. And I think this is really, really important that you understand this, is that it's your job to follow up. These people are busy or disorganized or whatever you want to call it, but make sure you follow up. Help them when you can. And if they like you, they'll regularly contact you. I have a friend that I walk with regularly. We walk, when I'm traveling in Europe, we'll wake up at 5 in the morning. Well, I wake up at 5, I don't know what time he wakes up. We start walking at 6:15. And this guy gets publicity every single week. But you know what? He's a nice guy. When the media contact him, he'll always participate. He'll be featured on blogs. He'll be featured on podcasts. He'll be featured on all these type of things. And I know a bunch of people like this that get publicity regularly. But I'm telling you, it's because they're nice people. And I want you to understand this, is that this sounds very, very simple, but these are the type of things that people do. Here's another example. This is a new business launched in Chatham, Kent. It's a business that launched a new brewery. Again, you can see this is a video on CTV. Very, very good for their business. Does it guarantee success? Absolutely not. But being featured in the local media is another example. These are local businesses, just so you understand. Businesses like yours and mine that have got publicity in the last 2 or 3 years. Here's a really good strategy. Again, depending on who you're dealing with. Often when I'm going to be interviewed on radio or podcast, I'll ask them, I'll say to them, do you want to send me a list of, you want me to send a list of questions that you can ask me? Why do I say that? Because I'm the expert. So this is really, really important. Actually, I was speaking earlier on about that new online course that we're creating, video. That's one of the things I'm going to be doing, is I'm going to create questions for these small business owners. I'm going to send it to them in advance. I'm going to send it to them in advance and say, listen, when we interview on camera, these are the questions I'm going to ask you. And think about answers, and we can discuss it in advance. So the idea here is that you're helping the presenter to ask questions that are relevant to your audience, okay? So that's worked really well for us. Maybe it won't work for you, but for us, it's worked really, really well. Again, we build relationships with these people. Whenever you're on radio or a podcast, same type of thing. We've done both, quite a lot of both actually. Relax, speak slowly and clearly. I find that sometimes I speak too fast because I get excited and I speak too fast. And I've got to consciously say to myself, just speak slowly. Ensure you're in a quiet place. And if you're ever on radio live, I've done this once or twice, and it is quite challenging. Once in the Caribbean, and once in Winnipeg that I can think of specifically where it was quite unique that they want to ask questions live. One of the things you do is you repeat questions. So you'll see, even when you go to seminars or webinars, things like that, we'll repeat questions. And the reason we do that is because it gives us time to think. Here's an example again. There she appears again. Very, very smart thing. She started a podcast with a professor, and they called it How We Built This. And then she interviewed influential developers in the city. And think of that. I mean, you're running a podcast, you own the podcast. It's very difficult to get through to these influential developers. But what you do is you play on their, I don't want to say their ego, but that's the truth. You say to them, listen, we got this podcast. We're interviewing developers in the city. Do you want us to interview you? Then this gives her exposure to these high-level executives, because it'll be a CEO that they interview. And I want you to understand the power of this is that you, again, do you have the capacity to do this? If the answer is yes, do it. If you don't do it, because it takes a lot of work. But the reality is that this can work really well. Actually, let's talk a little bit about video too. I've got a small business owner in my family, actually, and we've said to her every week she should create a video. And let me say what's happened to her. She's in a service business. And what's happened to her is all of her new leads are coming from these videos. So I want you to understand that. And when I discuss it with her, I say to her, don't worry about numbers, because that's the problem. Whenever you create content, whether it's a video or a podcast or whatever it is, the first thing that concerns you, nobody's watching. In the beginning, nobody watches, nobody listens, but eventually you'll get traction. And this is what happened. The same thing with Nama. Actually, I think she started with webinars and now is doing a combination of webinars and podcasts, which was really, really smart. Again, positioning yourself as an expert, using this as an opportunity to get through to influential people. I mean, we could do the same thing in the case of BizLaunch. We could interview business owners. We could interview a lot of people. It's not our business, but we could potentially do this. If you're ever going to be interviewed on TV, TV can be really, really good. Again, we do this, but you don't have to do this. We'll send a list of questions, if required, to the interviewer. I always say to people, relax and speak slowly. Don't look at the camera and dress appropriately. Marco, that does a lot of our video, always says to me that you can't tell people to dress appropriately. But things that I think about when you're on TV is, for example, you can't wear checks. I don't know. Sometimes I actually put a sweater on over this shirt today. The reason is I know it doesn't look good on webinars. Whenever you got patterns on shirts and things like that, it's a bit distracting. So if this little piece of material is distracting you, I apologize. I always say to people, don't wear too much jewelry, always wear makeup. Actually, if you ever see me on camera, I've always got makeup on. That's why, look, it doesn't help, but in my case, it removes the shine and things like that off my face when I'm on TV. So little things like that, or you can just go into Google and type in how to address appropriately for videos, and somebody's created for that. There's Nama, my example of getting publicity. Oh, yeah, you go. I didn't realize I put this on. If you're going to be on TV, here's a couple of things. Use soft colors that complement your skin. Okay, so that's what you want to do. So try and use colors that complement your skin. Don't use patterns, is one thing I mentioned. Avoid anything shiny, so too much jewelry and things like that. It gets the camera, things shine off the lights shine off it when you're on camera. Avoid excessive loose jewelry and de-shine your face. So use makeup to do that. Simple little things that you learn after doing this for a few years, and really interesting. Once you've got publicity for your business, there's a couple of really important things. Tell your mother, because she'll be very impressed. If nobody else in the world is impressed with you, at least your mother will. Put it on your website, which is a very good strategy. Actually, it happened to me this morning. Somebody that I'm working with, some of you might know, we work on a big project now in Portugal. Working internationally is always challenging, just so you know, especially in countries where English is not their first language. But one of the people I was working with this morning got some publicity, and she shared it with me. She was so proud of herself, and I said, absolutely brilliant, wonderful. And again, those are the type of things. I'm one of her customers, so this was the right thing to do. Put on your website, include a link on your blog, and share it with clients. The idea here is just to show people and share the success. And I want you to understand this. It's not about being vain. It's not about being popular. It's not about doing that. It's about growing your brand for your business. Actually, on Thursday, if you haven't signed up for that Q&A session or mastermind, I recommend you do that, because I'm going to give you a couple of examples of how you can build your brand around you as a business owner, which is a really good idea, especially in the early stages of your business. The first 5 years or the first 10 years, you want to build a persona, so people know who you are. And some of us struggle with this. I know I struggled in the beginning. being more popular and things like that on TV and stuff. But you know what? For most people, it won't even influence us. You separate yourself from all this publicity that you get. That's the way I dealt with it. So let me just summarize this before we end off this webinar. And remember, if you've got any questions, just post them there and I'll try and answer them for you. And on Thursday, I'll answer more questions. So if you've got more questions on Thursday, sign up for that session. It's 60 minutes. And then I'll spend a bit of time speaking about specifics about how you build your personal brand. And remember, I said earlier on, Marco will be here next week on Tuesday and Thursday, speaking about marketing. I won't be here next week, which for some of you will be a relief to have somebody different, but he'll be here next week speaking about marketing because that's his expertise. I believe that getting free publicity for your business is one of the easiest and the cheapest ways to grow your business. And I want you to think about this. Is there a way that I can target the media? And don't, try and, based on your business, is there a local radio station? Is there a local TV station? Are there local blogs? Are there influencers? Are there newsletters? Try and think differently, because sometimes when we say publicity, we think it's only the media, TV, radio, but it could be other things. I mean, if you become very popular on TikTok or become really popular on Instagram, I think the impact can be exactly the same thing. I always say to people that everybody needs content. If I had a blog or if I had a blog that interviewed business owners, which is actually something that we used to do years ago. We used to interview business owners regularly, and we needed business owners. And it was sometimes really challenging to find them, but they need you. They need you because you're really interested in local content. Always tell an interesting story. And if you can't find somebody that's a good storyteller, I promise you there's some brilliant people out there. Actually, Marco, that's going to run our webinar next week, he's really good at telling stories. I mean, it's one of these things, but he studied radio and TV and so learned how to tell great stories. And you've got to learn how to do that. Tell your story in an interesting way about why you started your business, where your products come from, all those type of things. Excuse me. Read the media. I think reading the media is a great opportunity because then you understand what they're writing about, what are they talking about, what are they discussing, and these are some of the things you can do. Get some help. So for some of you, like in the case of BizLaunch, we did most of the stuff ourselves. The reason is my partner was quite a good writer, not a very good writer, but quite a good writer, and he understood media. So we did most of it ourselves. Actually, in my business, I've almost always, not me written, but got somebody, and we've always done it in-house. And I've trained some of my employees because I'm not a good writer, but I know what goes into a press release. So I've used good writers to help me because we've employed good writers many times over the years. So read the media, get some help, either find somebody in your community, find somebody in-house that's a good writer, or find somebody at one of these local colleges, and never give up, because every now and then this will happen. I'll run this seminar or this workshop, and people say to me, those ideas you gave us about getting publicity, it didn't work for me. And I say, well, it's not easy. Nothing is easy. And if I made it sound very easy, I apologize. But I know that we've got tons of publicity over the years, depending on what stages and in all of my businesses. So I'm not saying it's easy, but I'm also saying that it's not that difficult, otherwise we wouldn't be able to do it. And I want you to understand that, that most of these things that we're discussing work when you do it. How to get inspired about content. I'm not sure what that means, Asia. What do you mean how to get inspired about content? How to create inspirational content? Is that what you're saying? I'm not sure. Just retype your question so that I can understand. All right. So for the business to business that have regulating body like College for Health Professionals, what type of media do you recommend we connect? Okay. So there are certain industries that are really difficult. I don't know what the rules are for health professionals, but if I was a health professional, I would probably write for health professional magazines. That's what I would do. So maybe if your association has a magazine or has a newsletter or something like that, that's probably what I would write. So that's the one thing I would do. The other thing, I'd probably create a newsletter. And I think that is probably something I would do. But again, you know your industry better than me and what you're allowed to and what you're not allowed to do. Again, I can imagine you can't give advice over YouTube channels and things like that. But I mean, I would go onto YouTube. Let's say you decide you're going to do video. One of the things I would do is I would go onto YouTube and try and find people in a similar industry and see what they are doing. Because I can understand that it can be quite challenging for certain industries, but go and find out what other people are doing. I was thinking of an example as I was speaking. I know somebody that's a naturopathic doctor, and she did quite a good job on Instagram. I don't know if it was legal or illegal. I don't know anything about the industry, but she would share recipes and share things. So it wasn't health tips, but it was health tips related. So that's what it was. So it wasn't specific saying, eat this and makes it healthy. She'd say things like, this is what I have for breakfast. And then I go to, these are the exercises I do. So instead of saying, this is what you should be doing, she was saying, this is what I do. But I'm not sure if that's legal, so you can check it out. How to choose the right content to have engagement be aligned with our values. Is it thanks to a tool or should we follow the competition? So that's a good question. I always say follow the competition. And if the competition is not in your region, find what the best people in your industry are doing in other areas. I mean, that's what we've always done. You know, even with seminar topics or webinar topics, I will see what other people are doing, either locally or in other communities, see what they're doing, see what's working, and then come up with our own models. So that's my advice to you. I don't recommend, I mean, you can, if you're really smart, invent new ways of doing things, but almost, I don't want to say copy. I suppose maybe I am saying copy. What I'm saying is find people just like you that are successful at creating content, see what they're doing, and then come up with similar examples, is what I would do. So instead of trying to invent the wheel, just be creative, is what I would say. I don't think you have to relearn the stuff. I mean, I know for a fact I've been doing this for a long time, and I run seminars and webinars all the time. We're not coming up with new content all the time. We're basically repurposing, redoing things. That's what we do. And if that works for me, it'll probably work for you. So Asya, what I would do is if you've already got content that you've created, see what really works well, and then use that to create new content, or look at what your competitors are doing, okay, or people in different industries. I think that's the best advice. All right, there you go. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us this afternoon. Remember, I will be back on Thursday, same time for an hour. It's a Q&A session and a mastermind. So I'll discuss how to become, I don't want to say more famous, but how to create a higher profile for yourself in business. And then I'll discuss again a couple of case studies of business owners. But if you've got any specific questions about your business, Thursday is the opportunity. Next week, Marco will be here. He's better looking, he's smarter, all of this stuff, and he'll be discussing marketing. Thank you very much for joining me this afternoon. Hopefully you learned one or two things. And I will see you next on Thursday. Have a great week. Thank you very much, everyone.